What we're learning now, a joint operation between Israel and the U.S.
That's right, Michelle. Just moments ago, the president made a post on social media. It was a video. He announced that a short time ago, the U.S. began major combat operations in Iran. As you heard Ian mention there, the president said the objective is to defend American people to eliminate imminent threats from the Iranian regime, calling the regime a, quote, vicious group of people, going on to say that its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. Now, this comes as the region has been on edge for weeks. The president, we have heard him over the last few weeks repeatedly threaten military strikes against Iran if its leaders did not agree to its demands, including reining in its nuclear program. At the same time, we have seen the U.S. build up this massive force in the region as we were waiting for potential action from the president. Now, we also know that these diplomatic talks have been ongoing. But as of last night, the president expressed his dissatisfaction with the state of negotiations, saying that they need to make a deal and they don't want to go far enough. But the president, throughout the last few weeks, has been stressing that he wants to see diplomacy here. Just yesterday, he said they hadn't made a final decision, but he wasn't happy with the state of negotiations. But again, this also comes as, we have been waiting for the president to explain clearly to the American people about what his ultimate objective is. Is this about the nuclear deal? Is this about the ballistic missile program? Is this about regime change?
Selena Wang joining us from D.C. Thank you very much. And we want to go to Martha Raddatz, and who can explain. She has covered the region for years in that region. Martha, tell us the latest of what you're learning.
Well, what we know now, this joint strike between the Israelis and the U.S. is that U.S. strikes involve a mix of U.S. aircraft and Tomahawk cruise missiles fired by U.S. Navy ships in the region. So this is a large-scale attack. It does not appear to be this limited strike, one of those options that President Trump was given, and that option involved making a preemptive strike to bring the Iranians to the table and be on the side of what the U.S. wanted. But clearly, those negotiations have really already broken down. I'm certain that the Iranians expected this. They knew those negotiations had essentially broken down. They knew from President Trump's public statements that he was not happy with where the negotiations were going. So this does, as Ian said, appear to be a larger scale strike that will probably last several days, if not weeks. There is one statement that the president made on that Truth Social video, and it was an angry posting, said, "We aren't going to take this anymore." The president said, and it's an extraordinary statement, "The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost and we may have casualties. That often happens in war, but we're doing this not for now, but we're doing this for the future. And it is a noble mission." This is the first time we have heard the president say anything about this to the American people, to give this kind of warning to the American people. He has simply said that the U.S. will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but he has not prepared the U.S. public or Congress for what may happen here. Again, the statement, "The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost and we may have casualties. That often happens in war," said the president, "but we're doing this not for now, but we're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission." Again, a reminder that just this week in the State of the Union, the president had said that the nuclear program was obliterated in the U.S. strikes last June. That is clearly not what the U.S. believes anymore. They believe that the Iranians are capable of building a nuclear weapon, and they are trying to stop that from happening. A reminder also that this was a president who came into office as America first. He did not want to involve the U.S. in wars, but so far these are the third strikes that the president has made since just being in office.
And Martha, Iran has definitely also talked about how it would respond if there were any strikes that were made again, entering that, what it calls that U.S. joint strike, and with the president's sobering message about U.S. troops. What does that signal to you in terms of the military buildup there, of how long this could last?
Yeah, Michelle, if you remember in Midnight Hammer, the previous attack on Iran, it was actually fairly low risk. We put lots of airplanes over Iran to make sure that the B-2 successfully get to their targets, and hitting the nuclear sites. Now, this seems to be much more widespread. We're getting preliminary reports of what appears to be decapitation strikes within Tehran, going after the leadership in Tehran, going after not only the theocracy, but the military leadership in Tehran. But there's also many strikes around the country that look like they're targeting missile sites. This has been the real worry about the ability of Iran to go out back and retaliate against Israel and all of the U.S. allies within the Gulf. So the other concern besides nuclear sites and the leadership sites have been the ability for the Iranians to strike our allies and Israel with missile retaliation strikes.
And Steve, as Americans are joining us tonight across the country watching this unfold, we're seeing video from Tehran, where Israel and the U.S. have entered into joint strikes targeting sections of Tehran. We don't know exactly what their targets are at this time, but what should Americans take away from this? We have a huge military presence across the region there, some 35,000 spread out. What does this mean for American families here watching? Everyone has a loved one who's in the military or knows somebody who is.
Yeah, the U.S. military has gone to great lengths in the past few days to make sure that any U.S. troops within the region that were vulnerable have been moved out of the region. So most of the aircraft we have there are to defend our allies in Qatar and the UAE and Saudi Arabia. We've flown in lots of anti-aircraft capability to bring down missiles and aircraft that might come in a retaliatory strike. So the U.S. has done a lot to lower their footprint within the region to take away any potential retaliatory targets that the Iranians may look to take down in the hours and days to come. I think the real point here in what the president was saying is that this is going to be a long-term effort, and this isn't just a pinprick. They're going after missile sites. They're going after nuclear sites. The president did mention naval sites. So down in the Strait of Hormuz, way down in the southern part of Iran, you have a very narrow channel where about 20% of the world's petroleum goes through every day. And so the Iranian Navy has had the ability to close that, which would have repercussions for markets and economies around the world if you took that much oil off the market. So the U.S. is hitting things that Iran could do to affect the rest of the world, which include nuclear sites, missile sites, the Navy that may be able to close the very strategic waterways that could affect the rest of the global economy. So a very interesting target set, much more in detail and much more widespread than we'd seen in previous strikes.
And Steve, I want to ask you, this is probably the biggest buildup in several decades. How does this compare to the Gulf War buildup?
Yeah, it's smaller just because the U.S. military is smaller since the Gulf War, but almost, Michelle, half of the deployable air assets that the United States has have been moved into the region. So a lot of air power in the region. The interesting part about this strike is that most of that air power has not been allowed to launch from bases in the region. So in UAE and Qatar and Saudi Arabia, they've said that you can't launch your aircraft from our bases to go after Iran. So much of what's happening now is coming off the USS. The two aircraft carriers in the region, one's in the Persian Gulf, or south of the Persian Gulf in the Indian Ocean. One is in the Mediterranean. So naval power, lots of cruise missiles. They are launched either from submarines or from destroyers. And so this is, at this point, a lot of standoff missiles. We're seeing some very interesting video of cruise missiles coming across Iraq. So these very low-level flying aircraft or missiles coming across and hitting various targets within Tehran. That's another part of this. This is quite interesting. It's the first time in memory that the U.S. has conducted a daylight raid in the region. Usually, the cover of darkness is used to make sure that the Israelis or wherever it may be, or the Iranians wherever it may be, cannot see those missiles as they're incoming. So very unusual in many ways. It's also unusual. It's the first time that the U.S. has jointly and publicly said we're conducting strikes with the Israelis. In the past, it's always been a coordination, but a quiet coordination. But this is very public. This is a joint U.S.-Israeli effort, and it is targeted at the regime. The president has said, we want to change the regime. Another thought here is, does this mean that people are going to rise up in the streets, or is it just the U.S. and the Israelis are going to take down leadership and hope that the Iranian people overthrow what's left of the regime?
Steve, we know that there has been protests there in the last few months, and of course the regime had cracked down, deadly protests by any accounts. A U.S.-based human rights group says thousands of Iranian demonstrators were killed during that time. I want to ask you again how this compares just in the last year with the June strikes, where the president said that they obliterated some of the nuclear sites in Iran. We're here now, though, and the talks had failed, the 3 rounds of talks between the U.S. and Iranian delegations. How is it different of what the military is doing now with Israel than how it compared with June?
Michelle, I think we need to wait for a little bit more time until we can figure out what the U.S. has actually done. In the previous strike in Midnight Hammer, we flew B-2s over Iran. We flew F-22s, F-35s. There were U.S. aircraft all over Iran and hitting nuclear targets in Iran. So one of the things that we'll look to see today is where else has the U.S. been flying? We know that they're probably, given the number of cities where we're seeing explosions, we know that many more targets have been hit, a wider variety of targets have been hit, to include 6 or 7 different cities. Now, it doesn't mean that the U.S. is hitting the cities. It means that they're hitting, say, missile bases in those cities. So very different, at least in terms of the scale. Previously, in Midnight Hammer, in the previous strikes, the president was very clear. It was going to be one and done, sort of get in, get out. B-2s will hit the nuclear sites. We launched a bunch of cruise missiles. This sounds like it's going to be a weeks-long campaign.
And that's exactly what Martha Raddatz had alluded to, too, with what the president is saying. And Steve Ganyard, thank you very much. We do want to take you to Florida, to Mar-a-Lago, and we're going to catch President Trump speaking, and we're going to take him in progress.
People. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels and international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again. They can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there is no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
You've been listening to President Trump speaking from Mar-a-Lago about the U.S. joint strikes with Israel in Tehran. Those strikes occurring in the past 2 hours. If you're joining us, the president laying out the foundation of a possibly prolonged war in the region. Let's go to ABC's Martha Raddatz with reaction. Martha.
That was an extraordinary statement. It is clear we are not doing limited strikes. This could last. We do not know how long, but the U.S. is now at war with Iran.
After 4 decades, the president said, reacting to everything that's happened from the hostages taken back in the 1970s, also leading up to the recent protests in Iran. Steve Ganyard joins us again. Steve, give us an idea. He also had a message, the president did, for those in Iran.
Yeah, Michelle, I think what's interesting here is that the initial strikes that we saw were cruise missiles. So because it's daylight, we'll have to see what happened, but I don't think that the U.S. would have put U.S. aircraft over Iran during daylight hours. Just makes it too easy for the Iranians to get a lucky shot here or there. So we'll need to watch where the targets were. We do know that many missile sites have been hit. It appears perhaps that one of the nuclear energy, the civil nuclear sites down in Bashir, down in the Persian Gulf may have been hit. Will be interesting to see if some of the naval bases around the Strait of Hormuz were hit, but the president made it very clear. This is a decapitation effort. It's a regime change effort. And the whole point here is for the Iranian people to rise up and to overthrow the theocracy that has run that country for decades.
ABC's Stephen Ganyard. We want to leave you with Ian Pannell's thoughts from Tel Aviv. He's there. Ian, you're under a state of emergency, as well as all Israelis in that area waiting for retaliatory possible strikes.
Yeah, that's right. State of emergency declared. Looking around here, the streets are completely empty. People are hunkered down at home, fearing the worst. They've been through this before, but nobody knows how long this is going to go on. I think one of the most remarkable things in the president's statement was his encouragement to the Iranian people to rise up. In other words, this is an entirely maximalist strategy here. This isn't just about dealing with Iran's nuclear program, which was what the operation was last June. It's not just about dealing with the amount of enriched uranium it's got. This seems to be about regime change, and therein it doesn't seem to have a finite length. We don't know how long this will last, how you'll measure success. The regime certainly isn't going to go quietly, and I think, as Martha and Steve have said, I think we're in for the long haul.